want to say thank you for coming out here tonight and listening to me and all the good stuff that comes with these living testimony nights. So the last time I shared my testimony in front of a group of people was 11 years ago. It was April 8th, 2012, and I was 12 years old. And at the time, my testimony fit on one piece of paper, and it was double-spaced and 14 font. So unfortunately for you, it's much, much longer, and it's a little more interesting. So I'll start by just giving you some background into my life. So that involves me sharing some of my parents' testimony. My parents had a huge impact on my life, very deep and meaningful relationship that I have with them, and I love them very dearly. So my parents are both Swiss immigrants. They met in Canada after living only 20 minutes away from each other in Switzerland their entire childhood to young adult lives. So if that's not timing, I don't know what is. But they both share a farming background and are some of the hardest workers I've ever met in my life. After getting married and having my eldest brother Robin, my parents purchased a piece of land in the small farm town of Newton, Ontario. They built a beautiful log home and had a little hobby farm. And soon after having my brother, they had my sister Celine, who tragically passed away at 3 months old due to human error. She was born with a heart murmur, and after surgery, a nurse did not properly attach her breathing tube, and this ultimately caused her death. My mother wanted to die, and my dad tried everything to be a rock for her and my brother. One night, when my mom cried out to God, telling him to end her life, he came to her and told her that everything would be okay, that she needed to get out of bed, and they needed to show grace. From wanting to die 1 minute, to going to my dad and telling him they needed to write a letter of forgiveness to the hospital, explaining that all was forgiven the next. Only God can do that. They collected all the nurses and doctors in a room and read that letter to them, telling them that they had forgiven them and they would not be suing. They never asked who did it. My parents' testimony had a huge impact on me as a child. From a very young age, I understood God was real. Without God, I don't believe anyone can forgive like that. My parents lived out their faith. They led by example. After Celine, they went to have my sister Leanna, and then me, and I am the youngest of 4 children. I grew up extremely blessed, and just remember that I know I'm blessed. I am extremely blessed. As previously mentioned, we lived on a beautiful property. We had donkeys, ponies, chickens, ducks, peacocks, goats, bunnies, guinea fowl, cats, and dogs. My siblings and I would play outside from sun up to sundown, either in the mud or in the woods. I do describe it as quite picture perfect. I have no recollection of a bad memory till I was quite old. Growing up, my mom would call me the sheriff. I was very confident as a child, had a strong sense of justice, and saw a very distinct line between right and wrong. If someone was doing something that I didn't think was right, they'd hear about it. This followed me into elementary school. I started attending Listville Christian School, where my first kindergarten report card stated, "Shanah is very social and has made many friends during her first term. She is a great addition to the classroom, but can come across as bossy." I was bossy, but my parents called it passion. That wouldn't be the last report card that had that comment. It became pretty evident early on that I also had a learning disability. This took a bit of a hit on my confidence, and I remember feeling embarrassed that I couldn't keep up with my friends. But of the areas that I did thrive was gym. I love sports, and I set my first track and field record quite early on in kindergarten. Athletics came naturally to me, and it was something that I fell in love with from a very early age. When I was 7, we moved homes twice in 1 year, all the while staying in Listville, and I kept attending the Christian school there. It would be the following summer, when I was 8, that I gave my heart to the Lord. I was attending a Bible camp, and one of the counselors asked me if I was Christian. I replied, "Of course I am." She asked me if I had given my heart to God. This got me thinking, and I realized that no, I hadn't. That same day, me and this counselor were in a rowboat on the lake, and I asked her how I could do it. So right there and then, We prayed together, and I committed my heart to God. I'll never forget what she said to me. Shanah, you have to tell as many people as you can that you did this and why you did it. Whenever a child at camp gives their heart to the Lord, all the camp staff have a special dinner that night to celebrate, just like they do in heaven. They are celebrating you in heaven right now. This wasn't a choice I made because I thought it would make my parents happy, or because I felt pressured into doing it. I had a very strong faith as a child. I knew God was real. I knew He loved me, and I believed with everything I had that God would always protect me. I knew I could do all things through Christ who gave me strength. I prayed every night before bed without fail. If I forgot, I would wake up and pray. If I just fell asleep while praying, I'd pick up right where I left off. This wasn't something that I just started to do on my own. My parents prayed with each of us before bed every night. I can also remember singing Sunday school songs before bed as a family. Red or yellow, black or white, you are precious in His sight. Jesus loves all the children of the world.
Yeah.
I would repeat in my head, Mark 12:30-31, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than this. I would say my childhood was quite uneventful, until when I was 11, and my parents started to brainstorm ways that we could have a family business. My parents were looking for something that we could all work together as a family. Eventually, they found a campground in Southampton, Ontario, Dreammaker Family Campground. They bought Dreammaker when I was 12. This is when things started to shift in my life. During this time, my life became something very different than what it had as a child. My older siblings began to make some questionable choices. My sister didn't make a great group of friends when she entered high school and very quickly found herself in some tricky situations. My brother got into a very toxic relationship, and the strong relationship I once had with my siblings became strained. I could feel the tension in our home, and my parents were worried about my siblings. They were stressed in the preparation for our move to Owen Sound and starting a business. I remember feeling very upset because my siblings wouldn't listen to me. Imagine having your 13-year-old sister telling you what you were doing was wrong and what you needed to change. I couldn't understand why they were making these terrible choices and why they were willingly choosing a path of pain. My life no longer felt beautiful. It felt like my family was being attacked. It was painful for me to watch the people I love get hurt. One Sunday, when we were still living in Listowel before our move, our pastor mentioned that we'd be doing a baptism service on Easter, and if anyone was interested to get in contact with him. Right away, I could feel God putting it on my heart to do it. I knew I needed to. And so April 8th, 2012, I was baptized almost today. What is it, April 5th?
Yep.
Yeah, very close. We moved to Owen Sound after I graduated from elementary school. My sister and I began high school at St. Mary's that fall. I was very upset about leaving my life behind in Listowel. I had made a great group of friends at the Christian school and didn't want to move. I was very angry at my parents. I quickly found a small group of friends, and I joined as many sports teams as I could. My routine would be going to school, going to practice, and then going home. I was lonely. My sister no longer enjoyed spending time with me because she knew I would condemn her or tell my parents what she was doing. My brother went away for college. I no longer had a strong group of friends. My taste in music began to change. I started to read really sad, depressing poetry, and I would write these poems and stick them on my walls. I wasn't praying like I did. I went inwards, allowing my feelings to dictate my thoughts and actions, no longer giving my burdens to God. Before this time, I would say my faith had never been tested. In the summertime, my family would move to the campground, and we'd spend our summer in a trailer. My mom would work in the office, and my father would run around the camp all day with us, getting things done. It was our life. When I was 14, I got drunk for the first time with a group of friends we had made at the campground, a group of older girls. On a property of 200 acres, we found many places to bunker away and drink together. There was always alcohol around. Their parents would always have a fridge stocked. It was the summer, and the campground was like a retreat for many of these families. Drinking became a normal thing during the summer of my young teenage years. Eventually, these older girls became interested in pot, and it was offered to me, but at the time I wasn't interested. After working at the campground for 3 summers, in grade 10, I decided I wanted to apply for a part-time job in Sabo Beach. Some of my high school friends had a job downtown, and I wanted to try something new. So I worked at the campground and at the cafe. There was a cool cafe that had live music. They would have bands come in on most nights, and I thought it was really, really cool. I applied and became a barista and worked at the camp as well. One morning, I was opening by myself. It was right before 7 a.m. I just put cookies and cinnamon buns in the oven to be ready for opening. And a woman came in. I gave her a big smile, we shared greeting, and I got her order ready. When I handed over her coffee, she looked at me dead in the eyes and said, "I'll be praying for you." She started to turn around, almost thinking I wouldn't reply, but I replied back, "Thank you. Can I pray for you?" She quickly turned back around, and we began talking. She started telling me about her daughter, who was a bit older than me, how she had been going on so many dates with these men that she had been meeting on the internet, and how she didn't like her daughter's obsession with having a boyfriend. She asked me if I was single, and then she looked at me and said that I was beautiful, that she could feel goodness as soon as she walked into the cafe, that I lied about me. She told me to protect that, and she encouraged me to stay single. Now, to a person, this story might come across as random, but at the time I was 16, and something you should know about 16-year-old Shanah was that I did not think highly of men. I had great men in my family, but because of what I had witnessed happen to my sister, I did not want anything to do with them. I didn't want to be looked at by them, I definitely didn't want to be touched by them, but my friends had all started getting boyfriends, and I began wondering if this would help me feel less lonely. This encounter was exactly what I needed to hear. I thought she was an angel. It left me shocked. I knew God had sent her into my life. I remember texting my mom right away, telling her what had happened, that this woman was an angel to me. I love my sister very deeply, and when we had a fresh start at St. Mary's, she was once again sucked into another bad group of friends. This really upset me. I admired her so much, and I loved her so dearly, and I would wonder where she was or who she was with. I knew her friends had bad reputations. In my grade 12 years, she called me one day while I was in class. She told me to meet her at the Owen Sound Merge. I left class, and she told me that she had been left at a house party alone with a group of men. I waited with her as the nurses did their test, and we cried together. It was one of the first times in a long time that we hugged each other. I'd never been so angry in my entire life. I felt guilty that I couldn't be there to protect her, and I remember looking at her and telling her that I might end up in jail. I wanted to go find the men that did this. Me and my sister's relationship changed from that moment onward. My strategy for years had been hounding her, telling her she was sinning, and that what she was doing was wrong, pointing out all her terrible choices. I just began loving her. I would sit and listen to her. We'd just spend time together again. I'd make sure she knew I loved her. I'd make her coffee and leave it on her nightstand before I left for school. This event solidified something in my own heart. I would never allow myself to open up to a man unless I knew he came directly from God, not because I wanted to glorify God, because I did not think highly of men, and I truly did not believe many good men were in this world. I was 18. Around this time, I also started looking into what I wanted to do after high school. My friends were all going away to college or university. I found a program only offered at one university in Ontario at the time, sports psychology. The thought of traveling with professional athletes was one of the only career paths that sounded appealing. I applied, got in, and at 18 moved to Sudbury to start my first year of uni. My parents never pushed me to go to post-secondary. My father really didn't want me to go. Now Sudbury is close to 5 hours away from Owen Sound. This, in a way, allowed me to escape and not have to worry about what was going on at home. It gave me an opportunity to start over. Nobody knew me. I could be whoever I wanted. I was put into a dorm apartment with 5 other girls. 2 were in my program, and the other 3 were in a program called Adventure Outdoor Leadership. We all got along well. The first 2 weeks of school were considered dry. You couldn't take alcohol in the dorms or have parties on campus. Two of my roommates were second years, and they started taking us off campus to attend these parties. They would feed us alcohol like water, and our hands would never be empty. After one of these parties, I drank more alcohol than I ever had. I couldn't walk on my own, and I had to be carried back to our apartment. I was dropped off on one of the couches in our living room area with one of my roommates and a guy who we had all become acquainted with our first 2 weeks. I passed out on the couch, and I'm not sure how much time passed, but when I woke up again, I was in bed with this guy on top of me. I didn't know what was going on, and in shock asked him what he was doing. He said nothing. I rolled over and pretended to sleep, and he did not leave. I lay there for hours till the sun came up and finally put my shirt back on and left my room. I walked to the hallway and locked myself in a closet. I was in shock. I had spent years having everything under control, making the best choices, never messing up, believing I was so close to perfect I could be, that God was pleased with my perfection. I no longer felt perfect. I had messed up, and this was all my fault. I didn't tell anyone. I found myself being deeply sad on the inside, and on the outside, a smiley, happy girl. Nobody wants to be friends with a sad girl. Weed was still illegal, but people in my friend circle were buying it online and selling it through the dorms. This time, when it was offered to me, I said yes. This would become the start of many years of pot addiction. At first, I did it so I wouldn't need to drink as much alcohol. I never wanted to be that drunk again. Then it started to become a regular evening ritual. All my roommates smoked, and we'd have a room filled with people getting high. Our apartment became known for pot, and people would just stop by to smoke. My first semester went by quickly, and I made no attempt to find Christian friends or a church. I stopped praying, and I felt far from God. I became a coward. I never shared my beliefs because I knew I wasn't living by example. When I did feel conviction, I'd just smoke again, and then I wouldn't feel anything. Because my roommates were all outdoorsy and studied to be outdoor guides or educators, I fit in with them. We'd go on winter backpacking trips, go rock climbing, canoe and hiking trips. I really, really enjoyed spending time with them. Over the 8 months of my first year of school, I only went home twice. When I went home for the summer, I pretended that everything was fine. I went right back to being the old Shanah. At this point, both my brother and sister were no longer working at the campground, and I had to step up. I began loving the campground. I loved working with my parents. Being away from them really made me appreciate the time I had with them. I'd spend time in the office with my mom, and I really enjoyed talking to people. I spent time working with my dad and started to understand his high standards and work ethic. The work would keep me busy, and I didn't have time to think or to smoke. On Sundays, we'd go to church together, and I never felt convicted for the double life I'd created for myself. Going back to school, I opted to live off campus, great choice, with some friends that I had made my first year. 7 of us lived in this house, and it very quickly became toxic. One of the girls made it a point to make my life very difficult. As soon as I was away from home again, I was back to smoking pot, but this time, though it became much worse, it wasn't something I did recreationally anymore. It became part of my everyday routine. I'd wake up early, 2 hours early, and I'd go back to bed. I'd wake up early, smoke, go back to bed, then go to class, come home, and smoke some more. I was constantly high. I didn't believe I could sleep without it. Some of my roommates started to dabble with psychedelics. Even when I wasn't in control, I still believed I was. I told myself weed was okay, it's natural, God created it. I did the same with psychedelics. If it's natural, it's fair game. I became very, very depressed. I was very numb. My addiction slowly started to catch up with me, and my grades started to reflect my lack of ability to focus on homework and school. I didn't want to live anymore. I remember praying to God, giving him permission to pull the plug. I was too far gone to be saved. The school term came to an end, and I was back home again. At church service during the summer, a pastor had mentioned a mission trip that he had started organizing to Haiti. My sister and I ended up going, but due to complications and political disarray, the trip was switched to the Dominican Republic. We went into remote mountain villages. The poverty I witnessed there changed my entire perspective. No running water, garbage in the rivers, garbage all around the streets, voodoo priests, black magic. It was life-changing. I watched demons be cast out, and I witnessed extreme poverty. It was this trip that I opened up to one of my leaders, and I told him about the problem that I had with pot and feeling distant from God. He encouraged me to tell my parents and to be honest with them, tell them how I had been living. When we came home, I told them, and they told me to get rid of everything. But as soon as I was back in Sudbury, I fell right back into smoking pot. On that mission trip, I met a little boy named Kiki, or Rokiki. I only spent one day with him, but I felt a connection. He drew me a picture, and when I came back home, so this was 2019, when I came back home, I took it and I pinned it to the wall in front of my bed in my room in Sudbury. When I looked at this picture, I felt guilty, and I had to look at it every night before bed. On purpose, I did that. When I looked at this picture, I felt guilty. I knew the Lord had blessed me greatly in my life. I had an amazing family. I had a home. I had food. I had clean water. I had a car. And I knew of God's love. By 2021, the Lord began prying open my heart. He showed me that I had been running away from pain and in turn Him. I felt ashamed of who I'd become. I thought I needed to change for God to change me. It's because of the strong faith I once had as a child that I knew spiritually I was dead. I began believing that if I put the effort in to change myself, that magically my relationship with God would be restored to what it once had been. I wanted to be sober, but it was hard to do that because I lived in a home with people who all smoked as well. It was difficult to retrain my brain because whenever I was stressed or sad or thought about my past, the first thought I would have was to get high. Because I never sat in my pain, I never healed. Began to watch services online again and began to open up my Bible. I was still stuck in the mindset that I needed change for my relationship with God to be restored. My last year of school, I was required to complete an internship. I was placed in a boxing club downtown Sudbury. I fell in love with the children. In the mornings, I would go in and work with advanced athletes, advanced boxers. I would talk to each one individually and ask them about their sleep, nutrition, how much water they'd consumed, how they were feeling. These are the factors that allow an athlete to perform at their peak ability. Without them, you shouldn't expect to perform well. In the afternoons, the kids would come in. There were around 10 to 12 of them, ranging in age from 5 to 14. Many of them lived downtown and didn't have the best home life. Before they went to class, I'd sit there with my little checkbook and I'd ask them similar questions, focusing more on how they were feeling. I realized many of these kids didn't have parents at home asking them about their day. I became excited about the idea of bridging my education with outdoors. Outdoor therapy was something I had done a research paper on, and the idea of starting an outdoor school for troubled youth began to develop in my mind. It was during this internship that I realized I loved children. I wanted to be an example. I knew they were watching me, and I wanted them to see someone who loved the Lord. It was hard to leave these kids. God used these children and Rokiki to show me that the world didn't revolve around me, that my pain was not a punishment, that my feelings are responses to what my mind perceives, and for the most part, not truthful. I couldn't wallow in my pain forever. February 2022, my parents sold the campground. April 2022, I finished my university and moved back home. And by June 2022, my first relationship ended. 2022 was the year of endings and closed doors. I was happy to be done with school and excited to move back home, to finally move forward and leave my past in the past. It broke my heart to leave the campground. Over the 11 years of living and working there, I had grown so much, it became a part of me. I love that place. I learned a lot from working with my parents. It was another blessing. If I hadn't come back home during those summers between school, I can't help but to think I would have stayed in Sudbury and ended up in a much worse situation. The campground became a place of refuge. God works in all things, and He loves the details. It was because of my first relationship that I met the Jonathans and the Pikes. Eden invited me to come to King's Church, and I did. God is good. In a time of closed doors, God opened a new door for me. I never had a church family. I made a strong friendship rooted in Christ. When I came to Kings, I was a very broken person. God knew exactly what I needed. He showed me that none of my works or attempts to fix myself would bring me closer to him. I needed to surrender myself to him. I had tried to be in control my entire life. I needed to surrender it all. You can't be in control. You can be in control or have faith. You can't have both. Slowly, my heart began to change. I didn't want to listen to secular music. I no longer wanted to cover up my pain with substances. I became involved with the youth group and participating in the women's Bible study. I started reading my Bible not because I needed to, because I wanted to. I stopped being a coward. I became open and honest to people about my beliefs and started living by example. I stopped hating men. I started practicing grace towards people who had hurt me, and the seeds of bitterness and anger that had grown for many years started to die. The devil's foothold on my life was slipping away. At the end of 2022, God told me to sit and be patient and wait on him. Out of the blue, a friend I had made in school told me about a job opportunity at a kids camp in Saddle Beach. I applied, and in February 2023, I was offered a job. The crazy part being, it was the perfect job. If I could have created a job for myself, it was this job. In the off season, I would be the director of maintenance, and during the summer, I would be the assistant director of outtripping. The two things I love the most: driving side by side in the bush and going on camping trips.
I got it.
I started the job, and within the month, they asked me to be a teacher in a pilot program they had just started, a land-based learning program for students at risk of not graduating from a local high school. Literally my dream. I spent 3 months working with 8 students. In the morning, we'd walk to the lake, and each of them would find a sit spot. We'd sit for 10 minutes, and each of them would write a response to a question I would come up with. While they were doing that, I would walk out onto the front dock by the lake, and I would pray for each of them. I was very honest with them. I shared my testimony, and I developed a very strong bond with them. They all graduated from the program, and I'm still in contact with a few of them to this day. I still work at this camp, and I continue to thank God for the opportunities and all the challenges it has brought to my life. Once again, the Lord provided. He opened doors that I was not strong enough to open on my own. Your egos, feelings, and the devil will tell you that you should cover up and run from things that hurt you, that you should run from pain and hide sin, and you need to numb it. For some, it's substances. For others, it's food, money, shopping, video games, porn. It's all a lie. For many years, I was not only breaking my own heart, but God's heart as well. None of it was wasted. The pain and brokenness will be used for God's glory. I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. My testimony is not over. I'm not perfect, and I don't need to be. I've been set free.
Whoa.
Thank you.